Coogs house. I'm trying to figure out who's playing quarterback for Colorado. You're trying to figure out who's playing quarterback for Colorado. Everyone is trying to figure out who's taking snaps for Colorado. So I think it's time to figure it out.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Be sure to make your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you want to join the conversation and you don't know what to say, we're asking for holidays or occasions to enjoy prime rib as we play Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes this Friday night. Hoping to eat up a little buffalo as well. Maybe a bison pet. We'll talk about that throughout the week, I'm sure. Look, we got a lot to get into today's show. Again, brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. But that fun has to wait to the third segment. We'll talk about lines and things of that third segment. Second segment, I want to talk about an advantage the offense has for Houston against the Colorado defense. But first, Houston's defense is going to be facing a quarterback that has a gigantic question mark. Not because we don't know what they do, because we don't know who they are. Options aplenty for Colorado, and I bring in the Denver Gazette's Tyler King to help me break this down. Tyler, who can you play quarterback? Who's playing quarterback for Colorado this week?
I would not put myself in the game. I have some eligibility left, but I don't know if it's worth using. I did not play football growing up. More of a hoops guy myself. If the Buffs this past year maybe could have used me on the basketball court when they went, 3 and whatever in Big 12 play, but I wouldn't put me out there at quarterback. And just like you, I don't know who's going to play quarterback. So this will be a fun conversation I think it's going to be one of two guys, Ryan Staub or Caden Salter, the two veteran-ish guys. But which one it's going to be this Friday, I couldn't tell you. And like you said, it's going to be two different styles of offense depending on which one is in the game.
So I want to get into both of them, but quickly. 5-star everything, graduate high school early. Julian Juju Lewis, he's not playing in this one in your mind. Is that because they're keeping him on a red shirt, or is he just too young right now?
He doesn't turn 18 until for like another week and a half, 2 weeks. And I don't think he looked bad the other day in his 2 series against Delaware. It was a unique plan that Coach Prime had with Salter playing 2 series, Lewis playing 2 series, and then we didn't know this going into the game, but Staub was getting his 2 series as well. And Lewis was just the least productive out of all of them. Had picked up a first down or 2 on the first series, but they went 3 and out on the second one, although that included a drop by another fellow freshman, at wide receiver. I didn't think he looked too bad. He took 1 sack, but it was just a very, very weird game all around that ended up with maybe Ryan Staub having all the momentum in that quarterback room when he was the afterthought, this offseason with all the talk being about Salter and Lewis.
And so Staub played behind Shedeur. We should point out he's acquainted with the culture and the staff and the whole night. I didn't know that I did not realize, and I did not know going into that one that they were going to include a third quarterback in the rotation. As a guy that covers the program, did you think Staub had a real chance at this job even a week ago, or is this kind of all happening just now?
This is kind of come out of nowhere. I mean, the coaching staff has always mentioned, Ryan Staub, whether it was offensive coordinator Pat Shurmur or Deion Sanders himself, have always kind of given Staub his praises. But I felt like it was more of just like a courtesy thing for the guy that stuck around because he's a really weird and interesting story. Something I wrote about last year, kind of towards the end of the season, because he made 1 start at the end of the 2023 season when Shedeur Sanders was hurt at Utah, played pretty well in a loss to a much better Utah team that year than they were this past year, in 2024. But he was originally committed to the previous coaching staff, the coaching staff that was responsible for the 1-11 2022 season in Boulder. And, Deion Sanders did not honor many of the scholarships, as this is right to do for the high school players that were committed to that class. They obviously we're going to go the transfer route with 50 or 60 newcomers during his first season. But Staub was one of the guys they kept around, mostly because they knew with Shedeur at quarterback, there aren't going to be many people, transfer quarterbacks willing to come in and be the backup because there was no guaranteed playing time at that quarterback position with Shedeur Sanders having 2 years of eligibility left when he showed up. And obviously Shedeur was, a pretty talented player. So Staub ended up being the backup kind of by default the last 2 seasons, and he looked okay in his very spotty playing time the last couple of years. Shedeur stayed pretty healthy last year, so Staub really only got in at the end of some blowouts. And then this year, they bring in Liberty transfer Caden Salter, a guy who's been a multi-year starter, won a lot of games at the group of 5 level, but still played pretty well. And like you said, Lewis was the 5-star, top 5 player, in the ESPN rankings, graduated high school a year and a half early to get on campus in the spring. And I always thought, Staub should have a chance, just given, like you said, his history with Shermer and the rest of the offensive coaching staff. But it always just kind of felt, at least from the talking points outside from the fan base, it was like Salter and Lewis battling for the job. But now out of nowhere, Staub looked the best the other day, and he might be the guy going forward.
Salter at Liberty was run heavy quarterback stuff. He's a really electric athlete. Like, I don't mean to say like he wasn't good at playing quarterback. It was just a very different offense. Ryan Staub is not that guy, and bluntly, Shedeur Sanders was not either. It would be a different offense no matter who it was. Do you think that, regardless of their individual talents, the team is more built towards one of these two guys? I mean, they don't play the position the same way.
I don't know if they have an offensive identity right now, and that was kind of the thing. Like they very clearly had one the last 2 years with Shedeur Sanders at quarterback. It was a lot of 10 personnel, 4 or 5 wide receivers on the field, and they sent 4 receivers to the NFL from last year's team, so it made sense why they did that. And Shedeur was obviously a really talented quarterback, but this year it was always going to depend on who was under center or what the offense is going to look like. Pat Shermer said as much throughout the offseason that, when Juju was in the game or when Caden was in the game, those are the 2 guys we talked about the most, that it was going to look different. And because the playing time, Salter obviously played the whole game against Georgia Tech, but with how spotty and the rotation that existed against Delaware this past weekend, they really haven't had a chance to develop an identity because there are so many newcomers. There's a couple of newcomers at running back, a bunch at wide receiver. The offensive line returned only 1 starter. So they're all still trying to work out the kinks and play together while trying to develop an identity. And it has kind of been interesting to watch because I don't feel like they have one yet. Although Staub feels pretty confident in what he can do and in what he does best, but still feels like Salter is trying to get his feet wet and get comfortable at a much bigger level than he was at when he was at Liberty.
Yeah, I unofficially call this the Orange Index because I use our lads to look at depth charts and stuff.
Yeah.
And on our lads, the transfers are orange, new names are orange, and old names are blue. There is a whole lot of orange on the offense side of the ball here, Tyler.
Yeah. As has been the case every year with Deion Sanders. It's always going to be the case. I use our lads too, and it's always going to be a lot of orange for the Buffs.
But you cover them, so how do you make heads or tails? Because I'm trying to figure out how to talk with my audience, and they're appreciating your insight because I don't have any on what to make of this Colorado team this Friday night. How are you making any sense of this? Because you've played 2 very different opponents with 2 very different quarterbacks and kind of a third. What's heads, what's tails?
It's really hard to tell, and especially when we don't get to watch a ton of practice, really at all during the preseason. You get the YouTube clips that they put out through their various channels, but that doesn't really tell. That only tells part of the story. So it's been really tough to parse what this team is going to be, and it's been kind of uneven. So far through 2 weeks, the score against Delaware, I think, doesn't indicate some of the struggles they had against that team that came up from the FCS level this year. Was a good FCS program, but it's still a very newly minted FBS program. So the scoreline looked appropriate, but the way they went about it wasn't always pretty. I was actually more impressed with what they did against Georgia Tech because I thought Georgia Tech would win that game a little bit more comfortably than they did, kind of getting that late score by Haynes King to put the game away in the last couple of minutes. Although some turnovers early in that game kept Colorado in it when maybe they didn't deserve to be. So, I mean, I'm still trying to learn a lot about this team. I mean, Pat Shermer, who was a longtime NFL coach, now in year 2 as the Buffs offensive coordinator, said, basically this Delaware game was like the second preseason game. And, usually you would have another preseason game before you even get to the regular season. But this is the Big 12 opener this week, and it's a big game for both sides. So it's really tough to parse. I think we're going to learn a lot about the Buffs in particular this week, both offensively and defensively.
Last thing on the offense, and quickly, if you were, again, we're making picks in the final segment. If you are going to make a pick as to who plays at quarterback, not who you want to play, but who plays at quarterback this Friday night, Who starts and do they rotate?
I don't think they want to rotate, and I'm going to go with Staub. Like I think Coach Prime is big on the feel kind of aspect of football and not just playing it with his head. Like I think he was really not surprised at all, but struck by how much the the team bought into Staub at quarterback and how much they rallied around him during that Delaware game. I posted this video on my Twitter from Deion Sanders' son posted his YouTube video, his highlights from the game. He had like a really good up close look at how the sideline reacted and congratulated him after he led that first 2-minute drive touchdown at the end of the first half. And it was like everybody on the sideline came up and gave him a hug, high five, whatever, getting in his face, yelling. Like they were legit pumped up. And I think Coach Prime believes in that kind of stuff. So I think it actually might be Staub this week. And I think they're going to try to use the momentum that he gained, this past week against Delaware. If it was me, I might lean Salter just with the experience, and I don't think he's looked that bad. Like I think a lot of the struggles he's had is just trying to work out kinks and trying to get comfortable in a new place with new players. When you look at it, he's only thrown 44 passes through 2 games. He's carried the ball 20-ish times, and yeah, he's looked uncomfortable at times. But I haven't been too discouraged by what I've seen. But I think I think it's going to be Staub.
We're going to talk about the other side in a second because Houston knows who their quarterback is to at least start the game, right? And so we're going to talk about what that inverse is going to look like in just a second and where I think Houston's got an advantage. Spoiler. Before we get too far, I do want to remind you today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at 5 Hour Energy, because if it's time to fuel up for anything, it's time to fuel up for college football, and it's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy. Now, this grape, ginger, lime flavored shot can bring the iconic taste of the golf course to your tailgate with a non-alcoholic boost, perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories. Honestly, it's a hole-in-one for your entire energy game, whether you're on the course or at a tailgate this weekend. Just need a little extra push to get you through your day. 5 Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. Golf's all about good times with good people, so can a tailgate, but good flavors are important too. The grape, ginger, lime flavor of 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse to go without leaving the course at all. Tee up for that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry to our contest here. You can amp up for even more chance to win a dream golf trip for you to any golf tournament in the United States. That's tee up with that golf trip to any golf tournament in the United States. 5hewin.com. Reading it too much. And no purchase necessary. Exclusion. Masters tournament ends October 31st, 2025. Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because the NFL season is here, college football season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you get ready for a kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet hits, you get $300 in bonus bets. You can get in on the game live after kickoff, in-game parlay, whatever you got going on, FanDuel's got it going on for you, so if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app today by visiting FanDuel.com. Get started. That's FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. Parker Ainsworth Locked on Coogs here. And Tyler, I say this lovingly. I think Houston's going to run the ball really well on Friday. And I did not see anything in what I've seen of the first 2 games to discourage me from that. Is there anything you can tell me about the defense at Colorado that should discourage me from thinking that?
No, not through 2 weeks from what I've seen from this Colorado defense. They gave up over 300 yards to admittedly a very good rushing attack in Georgia Tech with Haynes King and Jamal Haynes. That's one of the better quarterback running back duos in the country, frankly. But those guys ran all over the Buffs. They really never got, they didn't really make any headway at the line of scrimmage. They were kind of, Georgia Tech was able to get chunk plays when they needed to, but they were also just kind of, it was a steady diet of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yard runs, staying ahead of the sticks, that kind of stuff. And with a guy I really like that Houston has in Dean Connors at running back, I think Houston's going to be able to do very similar things. I think Connor Wegman is a guy who can use his legs a little bit more than maybe people give him credit for as well. So I agree with you that I think Houston's going to have an advantage on that side of the ball. And if they're able to be successful on the ground and stay ahead of the sticks and control the time, control the clock, like I think that's a real avenue for success for Houston and getting ahead maybe early and keeping a lead against a Colorado team that could be unpredictable on the other side of the ball. But I've been a little bit discouraged by what I've seen from the CU defense so far because that unit was really good last year. Obviously, using Travis Hunter, a couple other key safeties like Shiloh Sanders, Cam Silman, Craig. Those guys were solid last year. They've got to replace 2 linebackers. They had an NFL defensive end in BJ Green, but there are enough guys back that I felt pretty good about that unit going forward for this season. And Robert Livingston did a great job, in his first year calling plays last year as D coordinator. And I just haven't really liked what I've seen so far. They gave a bunch of yards on the ground in week 1. And this past week, Delaware had nearly 400 yards of offense, and over 300 of that was through the air with a bunch of chunk plays over the middle against some pretty good corners that CU does have. Maybe that was just a bad week, but I think, Houston's going to be able to pick how they want to attack the Buffs. And I think they're going to want to do that on the ground. And I feel pretty confident they're going to be able to have success there.
If the offense is a lot of orange and not a lot of blue because the transfers, the defense kind of the opposite, really.
Yeah.
There's only 2 in the starting lineup, a handful of backup guys, which I think makes me question, like you mentioned, they were a decent defense a year ago. Yes, they had a Heisman Trophy winner, 2-way player playing.
They also led the Big 12 in sacks last year. That was an underrated part of that unit, yeah.
Well, and some people might say that's credit to the great coverage too. My question is, with the returning so much talent in the front 7, are they good at pass? Are they good at something else? And that run defense just ain't their thing.
It's weird. I felt like they would be able to make some more plays, big plays on the defensive line this past week. Because obviously Warren Sapp is the guy leading that unit. He brings a ton of energy. They do a lot of rotating. There are a lot of newcomers on the defensive line, especially at the edges that they're trying to get worked in. There's been some injuries to key guys as well that haven't played in these first 2 weeks. But Arden Walker is probably the best defensive lineman they have. He's a guy that could play in the NFL next year. Colorado kid. But other than that, nobody else has really stuck out to me. They're playing a young guy at D tackle and Brandon Davis Swain a lot. They've got some other transfers. Jaheim Otis is a Alabama transfer that everyone was excited about, hasn't flashed really yet. I think if Colorado is able to have success defensively this week and maybe take a step forward that we haven't seen so far this season, I think it will be with those guys on the defensive line, getting a good push, maybe limiting Houston's rushing attack. I'm not super confident in that, but I think that is their best case scenario, is just getting the push that they haven't, so far in the season, and then getting Houston into 3rd and long situations. And they do have some talented pass rushers that just haven't been able to show it so far this year with kind of the struggles for defending the run.
For a Colorado fan showing up here that maybe doesn't know, Houston's got a 6'8", 250-pound tight end they got in the transfer portal named Tanner Koziol. Tanner is a pro. I don't mean that in like a standoffish, braggadocious way. He catches 7 balls a game. He's a pro. He's the right. He's a giant. He's not just the right side. He's a giant. What do you think they're going to do on that side of the ball to try and match up with him? Because it's like basketball. He's not a one-on-one matchup kind of guy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Robert Livingston has liked to play a lot of man coverage the last couple of years just because he's had multiple NFL caliber guys in the secondary. Obviously, Travis Hunter last year, but they've got a guy in DJ McKinney this year who was, the cornerback 2 last year, who could be a first-round pick next year in the NFL draft. He's a guy that's really highly thought of. Preston Hodge is a really good guy in the slot. Carter Stoutmeyer is a pretty up-and-coming safety that's getting his first real chance to be a full-time starter. I think he might be the best matchup because he's a really physical guy, about 6'2", 6'3", pretty big kid. But like you said, it's not going to be one guy matched up against Tanner Koziol because, like I said, he was one of the more sought-after tight ends in the transfer portal this past year. Houston did well to get him, and I think when they do throw the ball, I think he's going to be that clear top target, and the Buffs defensively are going to have their hands full with him.
So I don't mean to spoil the 3rd segment picks, and I don't want you to necessarily either. I don't think either one of us thinks it's going to be a really high-scoring game. We're not picking like 48-45. The over-under set at 43.5. Like,
Yeah.
that'd be crazy. But you're not calling this a slugfest either because you're acting like the defense is going to have their issues. What do you foresee playing out on this side?
Well, I just think with Houston being a team that could really lean on the rushing attack, that'll slow the game down a bit, limit some possessions. I think both teams, when they're at their best, are in kind of that 5 to 6, 7 minute range for scoring drives. So I think that'll limit some of the possessions as well. But I think both teams will be able to have some success offensively. I think it's just going to come down to a couple key plays defensively late in this game. And I right now I just trust Houston a little bit more.
You said key plays defensively. Last question on the defense before we get into picks in the third segment. If a key play is made by the Colorado defense, who is it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I'm going to go with Arden Walker, the guy I mentioned earlier. He's their top defensive end, a guy I think could play in the NFL next year. Began his career at Missouri, transferred back home. He's a Denver kid. His dad played for the Buffs in the late '80s, and is now in his third season with the Buffs. He's a team captain, one of the real leaders on that defense, and I think he could force a turnover or make a big play against the run, that either on fourth down or something like that, a fourth and short situation that gives Colorado the ball back. And I think he's a guy that could make a big play.
Big kid, 6'2", 250 pounds, real defensive end size guy. I'll talk about what that pick looks like, and we're going to talk about the FanDuel lines in just 1 second. But before we get to that, I do want to remind you that today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time, because college football's back. If you hadn't heard, Big 12 football's back. We can't be more excited. And out there in the stands, there's just nothing like that kind of energy. But if we're being real, getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Sometimes endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping right at checkout. That's why I use Game Time. That's why Locked On uses Game Time. The app that gives the best advantage back to the fans is the easy way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Just toggle it over. You see exactly what you're going to pay at checkout. You can do zone deals. You pick a section, let them pick the ticket in that section. It's cheaper for you. Tickets get cheaper as you get closer to kickoff. So check in as you're heading towards the gates, and you might just get a great deal right then and there as you walk up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. So swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Parker Angel, Locked On Coogs, are joined by Tyler. Tyler, FanDuel has this as it's moved. It was Houston 3.5 over the weekend at the time recording, going into Tuesday as at 5.5. That is spreading out further than I personally would think it. Are you surprised to see the line moving in Houston's favor over the course of the week?
Yeah, because usually the line always moves in Colorado's favor because everyone bets on Colorado these past couple of years with Coach Prime in town. Yeah, I was surprised when I looked at it yesterday. I think it was 4.5, so it's continuing to move in Houston's favor. But I think people, at least some of the sharp money, is not on Colorado just because of, like I've said, the uncertainty of what they've shown through 2 weeks, still trying to figure things out on both sides of the ball, and just maybe feeling a little bit more confident in what Houston's got on both sides of the ball right now.
So, do you think 5.5 is a good number?
I do. I think it's going to be a close game, and I wouldn't be surprised if Houston or Colorado wins by a touchdown, a late touchdown. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think it's going to be less than 5.5. But spoiler alert. But I think it's a solid line because I think it's tricky. I think it could go either way.
So 5.5 over under at 43.5. That means it's what? You take off the 5.5. That's 38 divided by 2 is not 16, 17. So you're predicting a game that's just over 20, just under 20. If you're looking at 43.5. However, the touchdowns, safeties, and field goals add up. I weirdly feel like that is appropriate. I obviously the people that make these lines are mad scientists in a lot of ways, and the amount of bad beats you get because a guy takes a knee and loses 2 rushing yards or whatever is crazy sometimes. I really do feel like this game is 24-21. I'm picking Houston, spoiler, but I really do think this game is like 24-21. And you mentioned a late score. I think it's a late stop. I think it is again, a Houston defense stopping a Colorado offense driving down the field that just needs to get in field goal range to tie it up. Big play. Like, I see that being how this plays out. You said you didn't, though. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. How do you see this one finishing up?
No, I think I actually agree with you. I think Houston getting a late stop and preserving a win, I think, is appropriate. So I'm going to go 27-23 Houston. I think there's going to be a lot of field goals in this game. I think there's going to be a lot of drives that end with some frustration with the red zone play calling on either side, a bunch of field goals. But I think Houston, I agree with you. I think they're going to get a late stop. I think Colorado's going to have a chance to take a lead in the last 4 minutes. Whoever's at quarterback is going to lead them down the field, but they're down 4 and not 3, so they got to go for the end zone. And I think Houston gets a 4th down turnover inside their own 30-yard line. I'm not going to say red zone, but I'll say inside their own 30-yard line to preserve the win.
So I like your style first there because having to preserve a touchdown lead or a 4-point or greater lead makes me feel way more comfortable than my own pick. So I like where your head's at. And I don't teach math, but 27-23, you're picking over the 43.5 by
Yeah.
a little bit there.
I would be surprised if it goes under, to be honest. Like, I feel pretty good about both of the offenses. Like I said, I think there's a chance that there's a lot of field goals and not touchdowns with these drives, but I think both teams will be able to move the ball pretty well, regardless of who's at quarterback for Colorado, and then with the Houston running game.
So if things are getting dicey, you mentioned Deion's a vibes guy and a culture guy. And I think, frankly, Houston fans are still upset about Alton McCaskill. So they've probably been cussing him in the comments the whole time.
I think Colorado fans are upset about Alton McCaskill.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, no, fair point. I guess I say to say, do you think if the vibes are going one way, and let's say he goes with Staub, and it is a low scoring, 14-10 kind of game at halftime, is he going to pull a switch at half, even if he wasn't trying to or planning on it at the start?
I think it all depends on how Staub looks and the offense looks. Like if he feels like, man, we really need a spark here or something like that, and the offense just isn't getting it done, I wouldn't be surprised if he switches from Salter to Staub or Staub to Salter at some point during this game. But I think Colorado will go into this game planning on playing one quarterback.
Which is just means all that football I watched going into the week is for like at least half of it's almost for nothing. They're just such different offenses. Do you think? Look, I understand you're a Colorado guy. I'm a Houston guy. Do you think either one of them has a real advantage against Houston that could put up more points in this low scoring affair?
I don't know. I think maybe it's Staub just because Houston's had success at the end of last season and early this season against pretty mobile quarterbacks. And Salter, I think he's just been a little bit too shaky in the passing game at times, looking hesitant on whether to run or whether to throw the ball. And some of his passes on the move have not been the best. So I think Staub has a chance to have a little bit more success, especially in keeping the offense simple, which he likes to do. And he's a good rapport with Pat Shurmur, good chemistry of what works well for both those guys. So I think Staub has a chance to have a little bit more success.
Tyler, you're covering them from the Denver Gazette. Tell me, and tell the folks at home, what do y'all have laid out this week for the start of Big 12 football? Again, for the folks not paying attention, first Big 12 game played in America this year, folks. First one's played in Ireland, so this is the first American one.
Yeah, it should be fun. I'm looking forward to getting down to Houston late Thursday night for the game on Friday. It's going to be hot, which I'm not looking forward to, but looking forward to any good recommendations anybody has for good food for lunch that day leading up to the game. So I always enjoy traveling, and yeah, it's going to be a fun Big 12 slate this week for sure. I think fans around the Big 12, we got that, like you said, that good game in Ireland between K-State and Iowa State. And, Iowa State looks like they're going to have a good year, and the loser K-State looks like their season is going off the rails pretty quickly. So I don't know if I'd be too interested in playing that Ireland game the next couple of years, because if you lose, it might mean the end of your season. But there's some fun games around the Big 12 this week. Even that Friday night too, I think Arizona plays K-State. And that'll be a fascinating one in Tucson. So we're getting to that fun part of the year with these Big 12 games.
And it's weird that it's a Big 12 game in week 3 for so many teams that then have a non-conference game again before jumping back into full-time conference. It's an interesting dynamic this year. And for the record, for the folks with the food recommendations, Tyler King on X/Twitter or whatever you want to call it is at King_Tyler B. Send him your barbecue or your crawfish or wherever you're getting stuff around town.
I'm a big seafood guy, so I do, as an East Coast originally from the East Coast, I do like seafood. So send it all my way.
We do seafood a little different in the South than the East Coast, so I think
you
should go try it out. Go try it out. Tyler, thank you for coming on to Locked On Cougs today, and hope for a fun game. That big Houston stop at the end is going to be a fun thing to watch unfold. But let's go Cougs at the end of this one. All right, go Cougs, go Cougs. And there.